Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Jack parked the car in the garage, took a deep breath, and quickly glanced at the back seat, where the bags were carefully organized, like pieces of a plan he had been working on for weeks. He opened the door to the house and went in, calling for Olivia, who appeared in the kitchen, surprised to see him with his arms full of bags. She frowned, confused, asking what was going on, as he walked over to the table and began placing the bags one by one, filled with clothes and accessories from brands she loved. Olivia stood there, watching without understanding, unsure whether to smile or ask if all of that was really for her. Jack, noticing the mix of surprise and doubt on her face, just gave a subtle smile, pulled out one of the bags, and took out a small white envelope. She still tried to ask what it was, but he handed her the envelope without saying anything. Olivia opened it slowly, and when she saw the contents, her eyes widened. There were 2 tickets for a 6-day Caribbean cruise. She stayed silent for a few seconds, holding the tickets as if she couldn't believe it, until she let out an emotional laugh and ran to hug him. Jack held her tightly, savoring the moment he had so longed to experience. It was the anniversary gift for their first year of marriage that he had planned with such care, believing this would be the step needed to rekindle the flame that, in recent months, seemed to have slowly faded. They spent the night talking about the trip, choosing together which clothes she would take, which accessories would match each dinner, and which excursions they would do. Olivia's excitement grew with every detail, and Jack felt satisfied seeing that his idea had the desired effect. She seemed lighter, more present, as if, for the first time in months, the two of them were truly in sync. For Jack, this was the perfect moment, the gesture that showed he still believed in their marriage and was willing to fight for it. Olivia, for her part, allowed herself to be swept up in the joy of the surprise, letting out sincere smiles and spontaneous hugs that hadn't happened so frequently in a long time. Days later, already on board the ship, they fully immersed themselves in the experience. Elegant dinners, seaside walks, laughter while exploring small islands, lazy afternoons by the pool, and nights of love in a comfortable cabin with a view of the sea. Every moment seemed like an almost desperate attempt at rebuilding. Jack watched Olivia laughing, taking pictures, talking enthusiastically about the places they still wanted to visit. He held her hand firmly, as if he feared that if he let go, she might disappear. Olivia, for her part, seemed to have forgotten, at least for a while, the real life that awaited them once the ship docked again. Jack savored every second. He had planned this trip as an opportunity to finally put away the doubts that had silently haunted him. For months, he questioned Olivia's behavior, her absences, vague excuses, unavoidable commitments. But there, on that ship, everything seemed left behind. He allowed himself to believe they were regaining the love they had vowed to protect. At various moments, he looked at her without her noticing, admiring her beauty, her carefree way, and thought that all this effort was worth it. They even commented during one dinner that this cruise would mark the beginning of a new phase. They laughed together, made plans, promised to keep that mood alive even after returning home. Jack believed it with all his heart. It wasn't just a trip, it was the hope that they could overcome any obstacle, that their love was still strong enough to withstand the wear and tear time and difficulties had imposed. On this trip, Olivia got the chance to feel again the lightness of being with someone who deeply loved her. Jack, on the other hand, believed he was giving everything he had for their marriage to be reborn. Unbeknownst to them, both were experiencing this journey with feelings and intentions so different yet so intertwined that it seemed impossible, at that moment, to realize that this cruise wouldn't exactly be the fresh start Jack imagined. On the 3rd morning of the trip, after a calm and unhurried breakfast, Olivia called Jack to sit with her on one of the couches scattered around the deck. He noticed something different in her tone, something less light than in the previous days. She took a few seconds before starting to speak, fiddling with the bracelets he had bought the night before. Jack stayed silent, just waiting, attentive to her gestures and her slightly faster breathing. Olivia let out a long sigh before saying that she had been thinking about changing their plans regarding having kids. Jack's eyes widened, surprised by the direction the conversation was taking. During the wedding preparations, she had made it clear that she wanted to wait at least 3 years, establish her career, take some trips, enjoy life as a couple before considering children. That had always seemed reasonable to him, so her statement caught him off guard. Olivia looked toward the horizon, avoiding direct eye contact with Jack, and explained that she had been feeling a kind of emptiness, as if something important was missing between them. She said that perhaps a child could be the bond capable of strengthening them again. Jack stayed silent, reflecting on what he had just heard. He remembered the past few months, the superficial conversations, delayed text responses, cancelled meetings because she always had an unexpected commitment. He thought about how, more than once, he sensed she was emotionally distant, somewhere else. And, for a second, he considered the possibility that this sudden desire of hers was just an attempt to fill that void with something else, another responsibility, maybe to mask a deeper dissatisfaction. But before he could say anything, Olivia continued, saying that although she was happy with the trip and his efforts, she felt they had been drifting apart for some time. Jack then decided to be honest. In a low voice, he said that he had also noticed this distance and that, as painful as it was to admit, on more than one occasion he wondered if she was involved with someone else. Olivia, upon hearing this, quickly widened her eyes but soon looked away. She denied it, saying no, that there was no one, and that the problem was simply routine, lack of time, professional pressures. Jack listened but wasn't entirely sure he believed her explanation. That conversation, which started so unexpectedly, turned into a long outpouring of everything they had been bottling up. Olivia spoke about her exhaustion, the pressure she felt to keep up appearances, the difficulty of balancing marriage with personal ambitions. Jack talked about his fear of losing what they had built, about the nights he stayed awake wondering if he was failing as a husband. Each sentence seemed to open a new wound, but at the same time, each confession seemed to relieve some of the weight they had unknowingly been carrying. After much talking, Olivia held Jack's hand and said she was willing to try for real, that this trip could be the beginning of the new phase they so desperately needed. Jack squeezed her hand tightly, like someone clinging to their last chance. They stayed there, hugging, for several minutes, without needing to say anything more. It was as if both understood that, despite everything, there was still something between them worth protecting. Deep down, Jack wanted to believe in that with all his strength, although a part of him still felt that something was off, something Olivia wasn't ready to reveal. When she got up and called him for a walk on the upper deck of the ship, he smiled and followed her. As they walked hand in hand, Jack found himself thinking that this trip could indeed be the fresh start he so desired. What he didn't know was that, despite the sincerity of that moment, there were too many secrets hidden between the words and promises they made that afternoon. Secrets that, sooner or later, would come to light, completely changing the future Jack believed he had recovered by planning this trip. As soon as the cruise ended and they disembarked at the port, Olivia stepped off with a light expression, satisfied with the trip. She believed the days at sea had been exactly what their relationship needed, time away from pressures, expectations, and the routine that, for months, had been pulling them in opposite directions. She walked alongside Jack to the car, holding on to the memories of that cruise like something fragile and precious. She was happy, believing that finally, they had found each other again. While packing the luggage into the trunk, Jack called her name and said, in that affectionate tone she knew well, that he had one more surprise. Olivia laughed and asked what else he could have possibly planned after all they had experienced. Jack simply smiled and told her to trust him, opening the car door and indicating she should get in. The drive was peaceful, with the city's scenery passing by outside the window. Olivia talked about the trip, the places they visited, made plans for the next weekend, even suggested organizing another trip for the following year. Jack listened attentively, smiled at the right moments, but kept his focus on the road, silent, like someone who knew this route had a destination far beyond the geographical. A few minutes later, Jack parked the car in front of Olivia's favorite restaurant, the same one where, years ago, he took her for dinner when they hit the 6-month mark of dating. Her eyes widened, and she smiled, asking if he had planned this the whole time. Jack gave a subtle smile and replied that he wanted to end the trip in a special way. They entered hand in hand. The maître recognized them and led them to a reserved table, one of the most discreet ones, just as Jack always preferred. Olivia sat down cheerfully, complimented the choice, said the place brought back good memories, that she always felt comfortable there. Jack nodded in agreement, and after a few minutes, called the waiter to place their order. She chose her usual dish, and he ordered her favorite wine. While they waited, Olivia talked non-stop, about how much the trip had done her good, about how she felt more connected to him, about the idea of starting to think more seriously about having children, as they had discussed on the cruise. She said that, for the first time in a long while, she was confident they could overcome anything. Jack listened to every word, keeping a calm demeanor but not saying much. The waiter brought the dishes, and they ate calmly, exchanging glances and small smiles. Olivia was wrapped up in the idea that this dinner was the perfect closing to the trip, confirmation that, despite the challenges, their love had prevailed. When they finished the main course, the waiter brought dessert. Jack then ordered a coffee. Olivia laughed, saying he was getting old since he always avoided coffee after dinner. Jack just smiled, adjusted himself in his chair, and subtly picked up the backpack he had left beside him. From inside it, he took out a manila envelope and placed it on the table, next to her plate. Olivia, not understanding, looked at him and asked what it was. Jack looked directly into her eyes and gave a slight nod, signaling her to open it. She pulled the envelope, opened it carefully, and when she saw what was inside, the smile she had been wearing disappeared immediately. They were the divorce papers, already signed by Jack. Olivia raised her eyes, confused, her trembling hands holding the sheets, and asked, her voice faltering, what this meant. Jack, with a serene expression and steady gaze, replied that he knew everything. He mentioned Cole, her co-worker, detailed how he had been tracking the secret meetings, the messages, the excuses, the mismatched schedules. He revealed that he had hired a private investigator months earlier, when he began to suspect, but instead of confronting her immediately, he chose to gather all the evidence and think clearly. Olivia turned pale, let her gaze wander for a few seconds, and then began to say that it wasn't like that she had felt vulnerable, alone, pressured by work, and that Cole had appeared during a moment of weakness. She said she hadn't planned it, that it was a mistake, that she regretted it. Jack listened to everything, patiently, without interrupting, but without yielding. When she finished, he took a deep breath and said that he understood what she was saying, but that understanding wasn't enough to erase the betrayal. He explained that this trip had been, for him, a farewell. While she believed they were reconnecting, he had already decided that this was the end. He said that he had already removed his belongings from the house, closed their joint accounts, and organized everything so that she only needed to sign the documents. He added that he didn't want arguments, didn't want accusations, just the formal closure of something that, for him, had ended long before this dinner. Olivia, through tears, begged him to reconsider, to seek help, to truly try to reconnect now that she understood the gravity of everything. Jack looked into her eyes, held her hand for a few seconds, and with a firm voice, said that the love he once felt wasn't enough to overcome the choice she had made. He released her hand, placed the money for the bill on the table, stood up, looked at her one last time, as if sealing a silent goodbye, and left the restaurant. Olivia stayed there, the trembling papers in her lap. Jack crossed the dining room without looking back, pushed the glass door, and walked to the car. Olivia remained seated at the table, motionless, with the divorce papers on her lap, her hands still shaking and her gaze lost. She made no move to follow him. For the first time since everything began, she didn't know what to say or what to do. Jack approached the car, opened the driver's door, sat down, adjusted the seat, and stayed still for a few seconds, his hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at his own reflection in the rearview mirror. He knew Olivia wouldn't come. He also knew that this would be the last time they'd be together like this, in the same space, connected by something they once called love. He started the engine and, without rushing, drove out of the parking lot, leaving behind not just the restaurant but also the woman he, just a few months prior, believed he would grow old with. Olivia stayed there until the waiter, noticing she was alone and upset, discreetly approached and asked if she needed help or wanted to call someone. She simply thanked him, got up slowly, grabbed her purse, and left the restaurant, walking aimlessly, not even realizing that Jack had already left. She wandered a few blocks alone, feeling the cold that came not from the wind but from within herself. Jack, after leaving the restaurant, drove straight to the apartment he had secretly rented weeks earlier. It was a small, functional space, chosen practically, without the emotional attachment he had always felt for the house they shared. He brought only the essentials, some clothes, documents, personal items. He left the rest behind, exactly as it was, because he had already decided that it would stay with Olivia. He thought it was fair. She could keep the home, the furniture, everything they had chosen together, because after all, he didn't want to carry more memories than necessary. When he arrived at the apartment that night, he parked, went upstairs with a small suitcase, and sat on the couch. He opened a bottle of wine, poured a glass, and stared at his phone, where dozens of messages from Olivia had already arrived. Some were long, pleading for him to come back and reconsider, others were short, just requests for him to respond. Jack didn't read any of them. He put the phone on silent mode and left it on the coffee table, unable to delete them but unwilling to open them. Olivia, after wandering alone through a few streets, called a friend, who promptly came to pick her up and took her back home. She arrived, went inside, turned on the lights, and as she looked around, she felt his absence in every corner. On the bedside table, the space where he used to leave his watch was empty. Only then did she realize the extent of what had happened. He really had left, and not just physically but from her life, permanently. In the following days, Olivia stayed in that house, now too big for one person. She spent nights staring at the ceiling, trying to understand when everything fell apart, at what exact point she stopped fighting for what they had. The messages she sent to Jack continued to go unanswered. He didn't block her, didn't reply, just remained in absolute silence, like someone who knew any word might reopen wounds he no longer wanted to allow. Jack, for his part, moved forward with life in the new apartment. He handled the divorce process with the same precision with which he managed the emotional separation, without rushing, but firmly. The lawyer mediated everything, and Olivia, after resisting for a few days, eventually signed the papers, accepting that, despite everything, there was no point in insisting anymore. The house stayed with her, along with some shared assets divided without arguments, because Jack knew it wasn't worth turning this ending into a battleground. After signing the papers, Jack never contacted her again. He spent weekends hiking, resumed the habit of visiting bookstores, and started traveling alone, discovering cities where no one knew who he was, where he could walk the streets without being the betrayed husband or the man who left a marriage. Olivia stayed in the same city, in the same house, surrounded by the same furniture she once shared with him, but now accompanied only by silence and the constant reminder of what she had lost. She tried to distract herself with work, accepted a few invitations from friends to go out, but always ended up returning alone to that space where every wall, every object, reminded her of what she had destroyed with her own choices. There was never a final conversation between them, no closing phone call, no attempt to reconcile. The end was sealed that night, when Jack left Olivia sitting in the restaurant and walked away, taking with him only the dignity of someone who decided he wouldn't live alongside someone who had chosen to betray his trust. And so, each went their separate ways, carrying with them the weight and scars of a story that, once upon a time, they believed would last forever. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.